Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. I'm your host, Patrick Riggins. In times like these, you will be glad you have stable and strong core principles to fall back on. That is the great thing about thinking about why you have the principles you do, not just picking them up here and there from television, your friends, or even this radio show. I don't want you to sit out there and soak up what I'm saying without thinking. You should never blindly follow. You should always be comparing what you hear with your internal libertarian filter and plain old common sense. Along these lines, I know you probably have not heard anything about this, but for those of you who've been on vacation or something, there is a shooting in Aurora, Colorado this week. Of course, everyone even remotely political is trying to use the tragedy to further their respective agendas. As Americans, though, we should be used to this by now. Any tragedy is immediately grabbed by both sides, liberals and conservatives, to try and make some hay off the backs of the victims for their particular side of a debate. What I want to warn you about is the jumping to conclusions that often happens with a big news item. The key is to always run things you're being told, as I said, through your libertarian filter that we're developing here on this radio show. The purpose of this is to make sure what is being said is not, in fact, an argument in disguise for taking away more of your rights and freedoms. This is done by our government every time it can. We have this so-called war on terror, which is never going to be over, and thus we'll never get back our rights that the government has seized, all in the name of trying to protect us. If you are a regular listener to this show, you understand all of this is just a ruse to take away more of your freedom. Here is a prescient quote from me on this show just last week. The government cannot take all the risk out of life, and it cannot protect you from people intent on doing you harm. The best it can do is allow you to have the freedom to protect yourself. I have said it over and over during this short time this show has been running. Government cannot protect you. You have to do that yourself. The only thing government can do is write up the report about what happened after the incident has already occurred. If you listen to some in the media, they would make you think this only happens in America, that somehow our country drives people to this sort of behavior. It must be that evil capitalism rewarding people for succeeding and making people who don't feel inferior. Of course, capitalism cannot do anything to anyone. It is merely a system. It is people freely selling to one another, helping each other through business relationships. That makes the country and our economy grow. Capitalism enables you to be rewarded for your hard work. And if you feel inferior to someone else because they are doing better than you, that isn't the fault of capitalism. It's the fault of that person. And it's the fault of that you and that person. Or, excuse me, it's not the fault of that person. It's your fault. There we go. I'll get that out. No matter how you feel, it is completely up to you. An external situation cannot make you feel good. It cannot make you feel bad or happy or sad. It is your response to the situation that determines how you feel. The situation is just that. It's a situation. It doesn't have an agenda. It isn't trying to hurt your feelings. Your response to it may be to have these bad feelings, but that is totally within your control. Unless you have some sort of mental problem wherein it is still within your control, you just might not be able to exert that control. But getting back to my point, these things have happened around the world. For instance, and you may not recall them immediately, but on July 22nd, 2011, Anders Breivik killed 77 people in Norway in 2 attacks. In downtown Oslo, he set off a bomb and then went on a shooting spree at a youth camp outside the city. On April 30th, 2009, Farda Gadirov killed 12 people at the Azerbaijan State Oil Academy. On September 23, 2008, Mehdi Sari killed 10 people at a vocational college in Finland. He burned their bodies with firebombs and then shot himself before authorities could arrest him. My point is there have been and always will be crazy people out there who carry out unspeakable acts against other human beings. To tell the truth, a lot of these things go unreported. But does that make them any less of a problem? Is killing people in one part of the world okay, while killing people in another part not? In the face of these attacks against our fellow humans here on planet Earth, our wise and close friends at the United Nations want to restrict and ultimately do away with your rights to protect yourself against another's aggression. The international organization is currently drafting a treaty with the goal to limit the ability of terrorists to acquire arms. However, the UN has never said who or who isn't a terrorist. And the wording is sufficiently vague that it can be applied to the general population of a country. Because so few countries in this world actually allow their citizens to possess firearms, the UN has decided to not exempt civilian arms from the treaty. However, through some last-minute bargaining with the U.S., there have been some momentum to exempt ammunition from the treaty. Of course, that doesn't help you much if you don't have a gun to shoot it, although they claim in the final draft small arms will be excluded. What I find interesting in all this is the desire for a static world. And we've never had that. But big government types, and there are plenty at the UN, want the world to exist how it looks now forever. And that has never happened. Countries are always breaking apart and coming together in different ways. People separate from another population. Others come together after years apart. The way they do this is usually through war, and fighting a war requires weapons, and weapons require someone to make and sell them. This is Earth. There will always be war going on somewhere. Trying to outlaw weapons or even trying to keep them out of the hands of people that want them will never work, because human will is not easily crushed. And if it is, it usually doesn't stay crushed for long. If terrorists want weapons, they'll get them. That's how it is in the world. As I said at the start of this show, governments cannot protect you. It is up to you to do that. And if someone wants to light off a nuclear device in your city, there is not a whole lot you can do about it. Don't sit there and believe the hype that our government can somehow track all the nuclear stuff floating around the world. It can't. Just think about the former Soviet Union and all the nuclear parts and pieces it had in that country. All of the scientists working on nuclear devices who are now unemployed and maybe have taken jobs with another country looking to develop a bomb. With all these things floating around, why hasn't something happened already? Is it because of the excellent security on our southern border? The best way to protect ourselves is by looking to our Constitution and abiding by what it states. All men are created equal, and they are endowed with certain inalienable rights. If we would treat other countries like that, we wouldn't have a tenth of the problems we have now. Keeping our noses out of other countries' business is an excellent way to start. But here again, we're talking about a government that cannot keep its nose out of every aspect of the lives of its citizens. How are we supposed to think it will treat anyone else any differently? Most people in other nations don't hate the United States. They, in fact, blame their government for their problems. In fact, the Pew Research Center recently completed a survey, and it showed that 92% of Indians, that is, citizens of the country of India, blame the government for their economic situation, while only 17% blame banks and financial institutions. 91% of Mexicans and Japanese also label their governments as a primary and secondary offender responsible for economic hardship. Even young people in Britain, France, Germany, Spain, Tunisia, Mexico, Brazil, and Japan blame their respective governments for being obstacles to the economy. But the point we're at now, though, fortunately, we're still rewarded for hard work here. And I don't know how much longer it will last on this present course, but for now, hard work does have its rewards. So, you see, it isn't our economic system. It isn't the fact that we exist. It is the fact that we are trying to mind everyone's business. And by having a presence in a country that is having problems, we offer their government bureaucrats a way to put the blame on us instead of themselves. No government is ever going to admit it is screwing its people. And by having us poking around in their country, they have someone to point at and put the blame on. So their citizens aren't looking to them, they're putting the blame on us. And the quickest way out of that situation is for us just to get out of their country and let them run their own thing there. All right, we're up on the bottom of the hour already. Just flying through this show. This is Patrick Riggins with the Patrick Riggins Show. We'll go through the bottom of the hour break, and when we come back, we'll have a lot of stuff here. We'll just try to cram in everything we can. Be with us here in the next few minutes.